You who don't, Tim Foley. I'm the CEO of the BRI. I just want to review our standard operating procedures and ground rules before we get to the program tonight. We will have an opportunity at the end. Whoops. This is actually a perfect opportunity to remind you that you should stay on mute. Otherwise, there will be a lot of background noise. We will not be able to hear the speaker or really anybody else. If you need to come off of mute, make sure you remute yourself when you're done with your question or comment. In terms of the speaker, we will have Q&A at the end. What I would recommend doing, the best way to make sure that your question is answered during the Q&A period is to, Maria, I'm going to mute you one more time. I'm going to need you to stay on mute as much as possible because you have a lot of background noise and it is very distracting. The best way to make sure that your question gets answered during the Q&A is to drop a note into the chat box. I will read your question aloud. If for some reason your question is complicated and you want to be the one to ask it, also let me know that in the chat box. The second best way to get your question answered. All right, Maria, please stay off mute. If you go off mute one more time, I'm going to have to remove you from this meeting and you'll need to relog back in. Thank you very much. The second best way to make sure that your question is answered is to use the raised hand feature on your Zoom toolbar. Probably the worst way to indicate that you have a question is to wave at me on the screen. There are 34 people on this. I will not be able to see you. So I would, again, strongly recommend that you use chat or the raise hand feature. Without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to CCAC Chair Jane Curtis for a general welcome. Jane?
Thank you, Tim. So welcome everyone to our final membership meeting before summer break, and hoping that you had an enjoyable, if soggy, Memorial Day weekend. Our membership meetings will resume in September, but in the meantime, please keep an eye on your inbox for updates and for summer activities. We're very pleased to welcome tonight's speaker, Mary Federico, who is making her debut appearance with the CCAC. And without further ado, I will pass the mic to our Associate Executive Director, Jeff Hanley, to introduce her and tonight's program.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Tim. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for participating in tonight's program. Our speaker for this evening's meeting is Mary Federico, the principal of Organizational Behavior Strategies, a New York City-based organization that specializes in consulting, coaching, and training. Ms. Federico serves on the board of her 200-unit Upper West Side condominium. Through her consultancy, Organizational Behavior Strategies, she helps leaders use behavioral science to improve their organizations. Ms. Federico earned her master's degree in organizational psychology at Columbia University. She is certified in executive coaching, also from Columbia, and has various other certifications in related behavioral science domains. Ms. Federico has 3 decades of professional experience in organizational behavior, working both in a boutique consulting firm and as an independent practitioner. She's worked with large corporate clients in North America, Europe, and Asia. She's also worked with state government agencies across the country. Ms. Federico's work includes helping professionals manage the people side of massive changes, influence up, down, and across their organizations, and run effective teams. Ms. Federico also works closely with her clients on how to communicate to affect behavior. Those of you who read Habitat magazine might know Ms. Federico as the author of the Ask Mary column, which focuses on behavioral issues that boards of directors encounter. Mary has been writing that column for 5 years. Mary Federico, welcome to the May membership meeting of the Cooperative and Condominium Advisory Council. The floor is now yours.
Ooh, okay. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I am going to pull up my slides and then we're going to just get going. Voila. Okay. So as Tim explained, you can put questions in the chat. I'm not going to be seeing them while things are happening because I can only concentrate on so many things at once. And the thing I'm going to concentrate on is these slides and sharing with you some ideas for best practices in annual meeting elections. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. Why me? Then 3 key best practices, and then the Q&A. So why me? So we already heard from Jeff. I'm kind of in this interesting place between applied behavioral science and condo board experience. When I say applied behavioral science, I'm talking about organizational psychology, individual psychology, behavioral economics, sociology, all those kinds of things about the science of people and how they think and how they act. When I say applied, I'm talking about the fact that I am not a researcher. I'm somebody who takes information about social science, about behavioral science, and then applies it to whatever my client happens to be involved in. And I am now using that on the board of my building where I'm in my 9th year, God help me, of being on that board. And there's plenty of behavioral issues that come up there that I'm dealing with all the time. My main responsibility on my board is to communicate with all the residents about pretty much everything. I mean, I'm not telling them when the water's turned off in the beeline, but I am communicating with them about anything that is going on in the building. And that could be simple things like, what's happening to the trees in the front yard, and more thorny things like, why are we having a $4 million assessment? So that's my responsibility, one of my big responsibilities. Another is to run the annual meetings. So I do all the notices of the meeting, the save the date, the preparing the proxies, all that kind of stuff. And then I actually facilitate the meetings, create the slides, all that sort of thing. And then I have sort of a hidden role on my board, which is to try to influence things using the tools that I know myself, but trying to influence my colleagues to get things done the way I think they should get done for the good of the building. So that's me. So when I got this, the title of this, and I was asked to speak on this topic, I was thinking that there are so many different practices that are helpful in annual election meetings. But what I try to do here is to talk about, to identify some 3 very high level best practices. And then I'll talk about details and things you can do within each one of those bigger categories. So the first one is that you must, right? I advise you to treat the annual meeting election not as an event, but as a year-round process, something that you're always working on. Not that you're always planning the meeting itself, but all the things about getting the right candidates, should you even wish to have candidates, which we'll get to, and making sure that people participate to the extent that you want them to participate, is not a matter of what you do at the meeting itself. Obviously, that counts, but that's not enough by itself. You need to be thinking about things year-round, because how you act on a year-round basis with your people, with your, obviously your fellow board members, but with all the residents in your building, is going to affect how your meeting runs, whether you have good candidates, whether you end up with good people on the board, and whether you can rouse people up to at least give you a quorum when it's time. So treating it like a year-round process, not an event. Secondly, making sure you know what you want. And it sounds like, okay, yeah, I always know what I want, but making sure that the board on these topics that we're going to go into in some detail is in agreement about what you are trying to achieve. And then that'll make more sense as we go along. And then adapting yourself accordingly, your approach to candidates, your approach to your voters, your shareholders and your owners. Your approach should be informed by the situation you've put yourself in by doing things for the whole year, and then the kinds of things that you're facing in particular in a particular year, excuse me, and then what your goals are for that year. So it's a year-round event. You got to know what you want, and then you have to adapt yourself so that you can achieve those specific goals. So let's talk about each one of these. I'm going to start with all the year-round stuff. So if you read the Ask Mary column, maybe some of you do, you will see that I have some themes, and one of them is building trust. So everything that you want to get out of people every time you want something. I want somebody to join the board. I want somebody to leave the board. I want somebody to give me their proxy. I want somebody to not vote for that insurgent. I want whatever. Anything you want people to do, both in general and then specifically related to your annual election meeting, is going to be so much easier if people trust you, and so much harder if they do not. And trust is not something that you build immediately before the meeting and then forget about the whole time. It is a constant kind of thing to work on. So a few things that help build trust. First of all, people have to see you being good stewards of the building, financially, physically, legally, all of those things. They're only going to see that if you communicate with them. So they have to know what's going on. And when I say good communication, that's communication that breaks through to people. It's communication that has the right tone. It has the right content. It's transparent. So it's not just, oh, happy news, and it's not just bad news. It's what's going on and why. It has to be clear and consistent, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. Also, a factor in building trust is that you're making promises and keeping promises. So if you say something's going to happen, it should happen. If it can't happen, you need to explain why, and then give people another date, for example, or another version of what's going to happen. You just need to have people see you as a group on the board, that when you say something is this way or something's going to happen and you're going to do this or do that, those things actually happen. That helps build people's trust in you. And finally, I mean, and not finally in the world, but just finally on this slide where I only want to have a few things, but a few key things, positive interactions with you. So a part of trust is liking. If people like you, they are more apt to trust you. Whether that's a good thing or not, that's the way it works. So if you never have any interactions with people, or all your interactions with people are unpleasant or around problems that they are having and maybe you're not solving, that's a very big lost opportunity. You want people to trust you. One of the things you should do is make sure they know who you are and they have good interactions with you, and you seem like a likable person, and that's a piece of what can help them start to trust you. And then when you need something from them, as you do with the annual election, you're more apt to get it. So year-round kind of activity, building trust. Another year-round kind of activity, managing perception. So you have various audiences here. You have people that you might want to be candidates and join the board, perhaps. And you have the people that are going to be voting, hopefully giving you a quorum. So I mean, there are others that you want to manage where you want to manage perception in their eyes, but those are the two big ones when it comes to the annual elections. So what is it here that would help? Well, think about your past annual meetings. What were they like? What kind of perception did the people who attended those meetings get of your board? And I'll give you an example from, it's probably about 20 years ago. I've lived in my building for 33 years now. I've been on the board for 8.5. And I remember well before I was on the board, going to the meetings. And here's a typical meeting, typical annual meeting would include a table at the front of the room with all the board members sitting there, and no name tags, no name plates, no introductions, no agenda posted, nothing. Everybody looked like they were in a hostage video. Everybody looked totally uncomfortable. The only person that spoke is the head of the board, the president of the board. At some point, someone would get up and start complaining and not stopping. You know these people. Yes, you've seen this kind of thing in action, I'm sure. Nobody knew how to facilitate. Nobody shut them up. It could go on for 10 minutes. They could be yelling. If that's the kind of meeting that you are running, and I'm not accusing anybody of doing that, but maybe you've seen it happen, right? If your meeting is not organized, calm, effective, obvious that, who you're talking to, the people look like they're enjoying themselves, who would ever want to join that board? So if you never mind what the people who have to vote for you think, but who would ever want to join that board? Probably nobody. So an opportunity to help manage perception of what's going on is your annual meetings, but that's just once a year. So there are other things. You want to manage perception through your communications with people. I mentioned communication and interactions before. This is an opportunity. Every time you're talking to somebody through communication, through written communication, anything you're sending out from the board, and also any interactions that you have with people in person, that is an opportunity to build trust and to create a perception. And I'm not talking about like a false perception. It should be a true perception of the board as people who are your neighbors, people who are caring about the building, people who want to make things better for everybody, people who share values, et cetera, et cetera. If you can do that, if you do those things, then you are much more likely to have people want to join the board. Now, whether you want them to join the board or not is another story, which we'll get to, but it's much more likely that people would think that sounds like a good thing to be part of, as opposed to something to, make me run for the hills. Excuse me. And then finally, finally on this list, current building issues. So what's going on in the building? So people are making assumptions and building their own perceptions about the board and its members, in part based on how well the building is being run. Are we having problems? Are problems being solved? Does it seem like we have a voice? Does it seem like you're good stewards of the money? All that kind of stuff. So again, if people perceive you as being a good group that is running things calmly and effectively and professionally, then you will have an easier time when you want to get people to join the board or when you want to get people to vote you back in. Continuing with the year-round thing, and you're going to notice that the year-round part is bigger than the at the time of the meeting part, right? So you have to have the right environment. It requires working on it all the time, establishing the right environment, excuse me, and not just waiting for that event of the meeting to try to make it an effective meeting that gets you the candidates you want and the voting and participation that you want. So let's talk about managing a candidate pipeline. So if this is something you have not been doing, I would suggest that you start it as soon as you can. So here we're talking about making sure that we have in our mind, and more than in our mind, we have had conversations with people and we have created a pipeline of people who would be next on the board if you have, you want them on the board if you had an opening. So my second Venn diagram of the day, I like a good Venn diagram. I hope that you can see this. So if we're going to identify people to have in our pipeline, there are the people who want to be on the board, and then there are the people you would want to have on the board. And hopefully there's an overlap. And that overlap is the pool of people that you want to be focusing on. So people who actually want to be a part of it, and you would like them to be a part of it. And we're going to talk about the details of who you would or wouldn't want on the board shortly. So both of these things right in this picture, these things are the same size. That's just for illustrative purposes, right? That is not necessarily going to be the case. Depending on what is going on in your organization, in your building, you might have a lot of people that want to be on the board because they're all fired up about something that they're annoyed about and they're talking to each other, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe nobody in that group is somebody that you think is suitable for it. Or you may have nobody wants to be on the board, but people that you would like to have on the board, but they just aren't interested for a variety of reasons. So just depending on your situation, and this can change all the time, excuse me, you might have one of those circles big and the other one small. They're both small. There's a lot of overlap. There's no overlap. Be that as it may, you're going to be mining that overlap for people that you can get into a pipeline so that when you need someone on the board, you're not scrambling around trying to figure out who it might be. Once you identify people, then you want to screen them. And I don't mean like a drug screen, although come to think of it, right? Maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing, but actually talking to them and finding out some things about them that will help you determine whether you think they are suitable to be on the board. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail in a couple of minutes. And then you want to maintain. So I've identified people, I've screened them, and I've said, yeah, Joe Blow would be great to have on the board. You know, we talked to him, we found his interest, we learned more about him. Seems like a good guy. He's willing to be in the pipeline. So now he's in the pipeline. And then it's a constant kind of a thing where you're always thinking about, okay, who are my people? Who are my candidates? Who are the folks that I would like to have on the board? This is very common in organizations. I'm sure anybody who works in the corporate world will recognize, pipelines for higher management. This is a very common thing to go on in organizations. Less common, unfortunately, on boards, but as necessary. So talking about identifying and screening people, I don't know, it's going to be sounds like a strange thing, and I can't get an answer, right? Because this is not interactive, but there's a movie called The Sheep Detectives that just came out. I don't know if anybody saw this movie. It's fantastic. And sheep are solving a murder. I know that sounds completely ridiculous, but it's a very charming, excellent movie. Anyway, in that movie, there's a very hapless policeman who has to solve a murder, and he learns about the different things that help you hone in on a suspect. And I thought to myself, well, some of that could be used as kind of an analogy for desirable board members. So here's a little cartoon or parts of it, whatever. It looks like you had the means, motive, and opportunity. And here the man says, thank you. And the answer is no. It's a bad thing to have the means, motive, and opportunity. But it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing for a potential board member. And I will explain why, one by one. So the means of helping on the board. Does this person have skills, experience, expertise? Excuse me, do they represent in some way? So for example, if everybody on your board is 75 years old, Maybe you want somebody to represent some of the younger people that are in your building. Maybe you want to make sure that people with children are represented. If it's very common for boards to have older people on them because there's people who have more time. The people with the little kids are unlikely to have time, but sometimes you'll be able to get somebody. So are there for the people that you're thinking about, do they have the kinds of, again, skills, experience, expertise, of different perspective, et cetera, that would be relevant to the board's needs? So if you're a professional bassoon player, that's, maybe you're good at being a team player, right? But that's not the particular kind of expertise that you'd be looking for on the board. But maybe somebody who has expertise in finance, or expertise in maybe I hesitate to say lawyers, but sometimes lawyers, but other people who are in possession of experience or expertise that could potentially help the board do its business. Excuse me. And then you want people who have the ability to learn, because there's one thing feel like I've told people who are just starting on boards all the time. It's that you don't have any idea what's going on until you get on there, and you need to be not coming in and saying, "Oh, I'm here to solve all your problems. Aren't you glad I'm on the board?" But rather to say, "I'm going to learn what's going on before I open my mouth." So if I want good people for the board, one thing I'm concerned about is their means. Do they have things to contribute? If they don't, maybe they're not my first choice. Motives. So I would encourage you, if you are thinking of people that you're thinking of potentially adding people to your board, I would encourage you to create your own list. I'm going to show you my list. But you might want to create your own list of motives that you feel would be appropriate. And I'm talking about motives for being on the board. Why does the person want to be on the board? I suggest that you think about motives that are okay with you, and motives that you think would disqualify a person from consideration if you had your way. There's nothing to stop somebody from running as an insurgent, but if you're looking for somebody to support or somebody to appoint to an empty seat, however it is that you do it in your board, then you want to be sure that they have the right motives for coming on the board. So here's a few motives that I've seen all of these, but here's a few motives that would concern me and would make me say, okay, I don't really think we should bring this person on the board. People who just want to run everything. They want power. People who are like, hey, I'm on the board. I mean, that's their kind of thing. They're just looking for the status. And we've had these people. Resume builders. So I'm not actually going to do anything, but it's going to look good on my LinkedIn profile that I'm on a board. People who have a personal agenda. So we had I'll just use some examples from my building here. We had a situation a while ago about a woman in the building whose son liked to play basketball, and we had a basketball hoop in a gym area. And because of COVID issues and whatever, it ended up physically being kind of a mess. This basketball hoop was in the same area as some strength training equipment. And we tried to put some rules around it to make it so that it wouldn't be an insurance nightmare and cause injuries, et cetera. But the kid, the child of this woman, he was a teenager, and at some point he wasn't playing by the rules at all. And so we took the basketball hoop down. And his mother first threatened to sue us. We took some actions to cut that off at the pass, which is beyond the scope of this discussion tonight. But she also said that she sort of threatened to run for the board. And I just thought that, okay, you're going to run for the board to put the hoop back up. I mean, that was basically her thing. And to me, that showed a complete lack of understanding about how the board works, as though she was just going to come on there and then the hoop would go back up. But it was just a good example of somebody who has their own personal agenda And that's why they want to come on. So sometimes that stuff can be useful if somebody's really interested in a particular project. You might put them on a committee, but you probably don't want to put them on the board. Expectations of preferential treatment. I'm going to do a renovation. Maybe they'll let me channel into the concrete slab. If I'm on the board, I'll just, I'll get some preferential treatment. I've seen people ask for preferential treatment more than once. So some folks have this in their mind as something that they think is going to happen and should happen, and you probably don't want that. An opportunity for self-dealing. You're going to have insight into all sorts of things, including people's finances. And there are some folks who could have a conflict of interest and really make hay with that kind of information. And again, if that's what someone's interested in, and not that they're necessarily going to tell you this, you're going to try to smoke it out, then you probably don't want them on the board. And the last one on the list of the ones I think are bad for picking somebody is that they think that the incumbents are incompetent or can't be trusted to do anything. And so that's why they're running. So if you have one sort of outlier person who thinks this and they don't have, and they're not able to drum up, a lot of other people to support them, that's one thing. But if you got a bunch of people that think this, then something's going wrong on your board. So you're not managing your perception, you're not building trust, et cetera, et cetera. So I would always hope that this is not the motive for somebody who wants to be on the board. There are some other motives, a couple of motives that I think could go either way. So people who think it sounds like it would be fun. I guess it depends on what your definition of fun is. And so a discussion with them might, illuminate that and figure out whether or not it's a good match for what actually happens on the board. People who are bored need something to do, bored with an E. So they just want something to do. They're retired, or they sold their business, whatever the story is. So they may or may not be the right kind of candidate. If you can sort of channel that energy into something productive, that might be okay, but it could also be problematic. They're protecting the financial investment. I think we all want to protect our financial investments. The problem is that when you're on a board, you have fiduciary duty to the entire building, not just your own particular financial situation. So that can be a little bit tricky. The kinds of motives that I'd like to see when I talk to somebody about being on the board are the sense of duty, sense of service, wanting to give back to the building, want to keep the building healthy. They want to help with some kind of specific issue that they see is that they have been hearing is in front of the board, and they think they can help. They think they can contribute some kind of skill or expertise, or they want to help build community. So stepping back for a moment, we're talking about year-round stuff to do to make sure that when it comes time to getting candidates and also getting people to vote and give you a quorum or whatever, that you're going to have an easy time doing that. We're talking specifically about the things that you do all the time year round. And below that, we're talking about creating and managing a candidate pipeline. And below that, we're talking about looking for people who have means, motives, the right motives, and opportunity. Oh, just as an aside, I almost forgot that I had this in here. Bad motives in action, a quick visual. Doesn't he look helpful? He's got a shovel. He's in front of the building. Maybe he's going to help. Although maybe you want to think about, why does he have a shovel? Is he a member of the staff? No, he is not. He is the Upper West Side's worst neighbor. So here is an example of somebody whose motive for being on the board was that he thought that everybody was incompetent and he was the only competent person and he was going to come on and save the whole place. And I'll just leave it there. And this particular thing was that, the staff was not capable of shoveling properly. So he had to help shovel. So you want to be very careful about why people want to be on the board. I'll just leave it at that. Continuing with the means, motives, and opportunity, let's talk about opportunity. You can have people who want to be on for the best of reasons. They have expertise, skills to give, and yet they do not have any time. And that's not the person you want on the board. So can they come to the meetings? That's like a minimum kind of thing. Can they work on tasks or projects outside the meeting? Excuse me. Are they on site or do they own a pied-à-terre? People who are on site are probably going to be able to contribute a lot more, both living on site and then not like traveling all the time. So previous board presidents from the one that we have now in my building asked me to be on the board decades ago, maybe 2 decades ago, but I traveled all the time for my job. So there was just no way, at least that's the way I saw it. There was just no way I was going to say, yeah, I'll be a board member and, I'm going to be, sorry, I'm not going to be there at this meeting. Oh, I'm not going to be there at that meeting either. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, I can't do that. So not everybody feels that way. Some people doesn't seem to bother them that they're going to be gone and they have no time. But that's not what you want. So you want people who have the opportunity to serve. They're actually going to be doing it. They're going to attend the meetings. They're going to work on tasks. They're going to maybe, hopefully, be on site and much more likely to be tapped for things that are important to the board. If you don't mind, I'm going to have a little sip of water out of the biggest glass in the world here. Okay. So we've talked about means, motive, and opportunity. And in the beginning, I said you want to select people and you want to screen them. What do you actually say to them? What happens when you're talking to them? So, and then, you handle this how you like. This is sort of the guidelines that I have that I go by. So you want to describe the fact that you have a pipeline and what you're doing. Hey, we're looking for people who might be interested in being on the board at some point. It's not right this minute. But we know we'll have people that retire, people that leave, people that don't want to do it anymore. And we want to make sure that we have good people that are interested in helping and have the means, motive, and opportunity, etc. And so our goal is to be talking to people like that. And you are one of those people. So telling them, here's how it works with us. This is what we do. Just a little bit of information about how you handle things. Excuse me. You want to find out, okay, are you interested? If they're not interested, you should try to find out why, because it could be that it's just something temporary that late, okay, I'm traveling too much right now. Okay, is that going to be a permanent thing or whatever? Or I wouldn't be able to do this or that. And you might say, okay, well, we don't need you to do this or that. Or, it seemed like it was kind of like a thankless task. And maybe say, I don't see it that way. This is how I feel about it. And this is the satisfaction I've gotten out of it and blah, blah, blah. So if they're not interested, fine, they're not interested, but it might help you to find out why. You might even find that they have a perception that is not at all true, and that tells you something about how you have to present yourself to to the board going forward. I'm sorry, to the residents going forward. Have them tell you about their background. And then you can ask them questions, and obviously, whatever you want to ask to kind of get to know them. But the kinds of things that I'm interested in that I ask are things like, I'm trying to find out, as you'll see here, I'm trying to find out the means, motive, and opportunity. So asking them what interests them about being on the board, what would they like to contribute? Would they see a role for themselves? Is there something they want to accomplish? How can they see themselves working with their colleagues? And you might hear an answer like, working with my colleagues. Well, I'd like to work with a couple of people on this thing. This really interests me, and I see that we're going to need to do this. So this would be fun to be on a little team about that. Or you might hear someone who says, just give me a task and I'm going to go off and do it. I'm not working with anybody else, and then you're going to decide, what do you really want? What's the kind of thing that would work with your particular board and the specific things that you're up against. I would ask them if they have time to do stuff. And I would also invite all their questions. The time thing, and we had an interesting situation where we had a guy who was constantly traveling on business, and he was, so when I look back at the motives, he was very happy to say I'm on the board, but he didn't actually ever do anything. He never did anything. He came to half the meetings. He never did a task. He never did a project, nothing. So I guess he thought that just showing up every once in a while was his contribution to things. And we got him off the board in a way that I will not go into right now. But he protested about how he ended up off the board. And he emphasized his skills as a business person and his company and what it was doing, whatever. And we made him understand that we recognize that, but he didn't have any time. And so having the skills, having the ability, if you don't have the time, you might as well not have any of those things. Maybe that sounds a little harsh, but that was basically the story. So let's move on past the year-round items. So we talked about 3 major year-round items: building trust, managing perception, and then creating and maintaining a candidate pipeline with some information about the details about how you might be doing that. Let's talk about the second best practice, which I teed up in the beginning, which was knowing what you want. And let's talk about knowing what you want for this election. Actually, before I get to that, I think that hopefully you and your board are on the same page about what you're trying to achieve for the building and your vision for the building. Because if you've never talked about that, you may end up going in different directions and not working so well as a team when it comes to getting down to some specific projects and tasks. So I think it's safe to say that everybody wants a building that's running smoothly and that is in good physical shape and good financial shape and good legal shape, and has it'd be nice to have some sense of community, and the people are not, asking for the board members' heads on a pike. I mean, that it's easy to govern. So we have some basic feelings about, what it means to be in a building that runs nicely. But now let's talk a little bit more about, okay, what specifically you might want, starting with candidates. So I'm not now talking about what you want in a candidate as far as their motives and stuff. I'm talking more about what you want to do around candidates for this particular election. So what are you trying to do? Are you trying to keep all the incumbents in their seats? Because you might be doing that, in which case you're not really going to need a lot of other candidates. You're hoping there's no other candidates, right? Are you trying to fill an empty seat? Are you trying to block an insurgent that just popped out of nowhere that you think is not suitable and is actually competing with somebody who you think should remain on the board? Are you trying to remove an incumbent? It's a possibility. So what is it that you're trying to achieve? And, you're going to take different actions based on which of these situations you're in. And so you should know, and you should be, of one mind about what the goal is for this particular election. Same thing regarding the voters. So say the shareholders and the owners. So are you trying to get a quorum? So most times the answer is yes, but there could be a situation where you don't want a quorum, which I'll get to in a minute. Do you just want them to confirm the incumbents? You want to do like a voting by acclamation type of thing? Do you want them to support a candidate that you've recommended? Do you want them to reject an insurgent? Do you want them to reject an incumbent? What is it that you want them to do? Maybe you want them, as a final thing, maybe you have some policies that you want to change and you need 2/3 of your vote or whatever. So is it that? Do you want people to support a particular policy change that you're advocating? You need to know what your situation is so that you can then take the steps that will match with the goals that you're trying to achieve. And that's going to be different all the time. I mean, I'm wondering if it's the case for other people, but I know at least for us, sometimes we don't have anybody running for the board and it's just, reaffirming the incumbents. Sometimes we have an empty seat and we are in favor of a person and, we suggest that people vote for them. Other times we have somebody that is trying to be destructive, and is looking to unseat somebody that we think is doing a good job and should stay there. So it's different every year, and you just need to be sure that you know what situation you are in so that you can take the right next steps. So that is knowing what you want, and now you have to adapt to that. So let's talk for a minute about getting a quorum, overcoming apathy, increasing voter participation. So that was in the description of this meeting. And I will tell you that these are all the same problem, all three of these things. They're not different. Okay? They have the same underlying issue. And that issue is attention. So getting people's attention is the first issue. Getting people's attention is very difficult. It's a very scarce resource. Added to that, people don't read. So I don't know if that's a shocking piece of information to you or something you already know from experience. But it's hard to get people's attention. It's hard to get them to read things. And without that, in a lot of cases, you can't explain things to people. You can't give them the information they need to make a good kind of decision. And you can't get them to come and vote if you can't get the information to them about, what's going on, why they should come, why you need them to why you need them to hand in the proxy. It's whatever it is you need from them if you can't get their attention. So I'm sure I'm in this situation. Everybody I know is in this situation. I'm guessing a lot of you are in this situation where you're just bombarded with stuff, right? It's all day, all the time. You're bombarded with things and you have to decide what to pay attention to. And a lot of times, if it's not on fire, it's not the next thing you're going to look at, right? And that's the same way with your voters, right? You're trying to get their attention and they're just trying to live their lives, right? So all of this stuff, overcoming their apathy. I mean, you could call it apathy, or you could call it just sorting out their priorities. I mean, they, they might think that everything's fine, and we'll get to that in a minute. And so it's not apathy; it's just a realistic assessment of the situation and what they should then do. You have a dilemma, and that dilemma is that if the status quo is good, there's not a lot of energy for change, and there's not a lot of energy for the behavior that you want that isn't the behavior they're already doing, which is just going on with their life and not paying any attention to you. So suddenly you want them to come and vote on something. You want them to read about the details. You want them to maybe pick a new person. You want them to fill out a proxy, and they've got to read stuff for that, whatever. It's just like, you know what? It's going great. Thank you very much. The kinds of things that generate energy for change, generate energy for the kinds of behaviors that you want to help you. And this can be either voting or it can be volunteering to be a candidate in the future. Discontent, drama, controversy. Those are the things that generate a lot of attention. They generate some energy for doing something. But those are not the things you want for your building. So if you're working to make your building a place where there isn't discontent and there isn't controversy and there isn't drama, there's just a nice running of the building, everybody's working together, things are going well. You don't want this kind of stuff. And yet this is the only stuff that's going to get people's attention. Not the only stuff, it's the primary stuff that's going to get their attention. So this is the dilemma that you have to live with. The more that you reach your goal of everything going well, the less likely people think they need to do anything to have it continue to go well. Excuse me. So what do you do to get people's attention? First of all, you need trust. We're back to that, right? So people need to feel that if you're trying to get in front of them, you're trying to make them expend some energy, you're trying to make them think about the things that you want them to think about. If they trust that you have their best interests in mind, and then you say that this is important, then they're more likely to say, okay, I'll take a look at it. And if they like you, they might do it just as a favor for you. And so sometimes this comes down to like, you're running into them in the elevator, or you're talking to people at the summer gathering or whatever, and you're saying, guys, I really need you to do XYZ. And they, okay, or I need you to fill out that proxy. Did you fill out that proxy? You're killing me, right? Please give me the proxy, right? So trust and liking are the kinds of things that they can be like the substrate, and that's something that you can build on in order to get people's attention. Year-round communication. They need to know that when you have something to tell them, that they can trust it, that it doesn't just come out of the blue. It's part of a broader thing. They know that, and if this is the case, that previously when you've sent things out, that those things are easy to read and it's easy to figure out what you're supposed to do, and you don't have to go through, 2 pages of densely, written stuff to find out that they want you to, the board wants you to do one thing, so if you're in the business of communicating with people, then it's going to be easier to get their attention because they see that your stuff is worthwhile. And you don't just contact them for nonsense. You have focused and organized kinds of communication that are much more likely to be attended to when they come out, if you've established your bona fides already. Your things have to be easy to understand. So I look at stuff sometimes that boards have written, and they're at the 14th grade level. And so this is not to insult anybody, but that's not scannable. That's not something that's easy to look at and grasp immediately. You need simple, simple, simple. You need stuff that's simple for people to grasp, and they're not going to have to put out a lot of cognitive effort, because there's cognitive effort involved in understanding some of these things. And who's going to expend most of that effort? If you just write it like you're writing, your PhD or whatever, and you don't think about making it really readable, then the effort is on their part. They have to do it. Whereas if you expend the effort to make it really, really readable, really visually easy to comprehend, comes at them in different ways, it's easy for them to just scan through. You're the one making the effort, and you have much more of a chance of people paying attention. Simplified instructions and a simplified proxy. Some of the stuff is so confusing about what happens when there is or isn't, somebody, if it's a contested election or not a contested election, then the lawyers want you to send out stuff that's, in their jargon, and it's incomprehensible. And so whatever you can do to make that easier to understand. You need repeated calls for action. If you want people to do something, if you want to get a quorum, then you need to be letting people know, not just once and hoping for the best, but over and over again. And then you're going to need a hands-on effort. I don't know if there's ever been a time that we haven't had to have somebody beat the bushes to get us over the bar for a quorum. The hands-on personal kind of stuff It starts, as soon as we send the proxy out, as soon as we first send them out, and it ends the night of the election. So just a couple of situational examples. Then we'll talk about meeting and greeting, and then we'll go to question and answer. So let's say you want to retain incumbents. So from the pipeline perspective, you're not doing anything with your pipeline. Those people are sitting tight. You're not introducing them into the mix at this point. Maybe you'll have a meet and greet. It depends on how long the incumbents have been there, what kind of turnover there is in your building. Maybe it makes sense to have that, to actually have people get a chance to meet the incumbents. The message that you're sending is, hey, we're doing the job. We've done this, we've done that. We want to continue to serve. Please just, vote for us. And a quorum, the urgency to get a quorum is going to depend in part on whether an insurgent decides to run. So normally you want a quorum, and there are, I guess it varies by the bylaws, but I know at least in our building that if we don't have a quorum, we need to like have another meeting, and either we do that or the next year there's going to be, instead of 3 people up, there's going to be 6 people up for the seats, and that's a mess. And we don't really want to do that. But not every building is like that. But if there's another person running and they're running against the incumbents, and you don't want them, you'd rather not have them get a seat against one of the incumbents, then no quorum is your friend. Not having a quorum is your friend, because then things stay exactly as they are now. And I'm not saying you should do that or not, but I'm saying that that's a potential way to adapt to that situation where you want the incumbents. You want to fill an empty seat. This is where your pipeline's coming into play. You don't want just random people. You don't want random people. You want people that you have. You want to have somebody that you already know is going to help the board and the building, not just somebody that got a wild hair one day and decided, yeah, the basketball hoop. I'm gonna run for the board. So this is where you can pick somebody that you can endorse, or in some cases appoint if it's an empty seat. And then when that seat comes up, people vote for them. It's a good idea to have a meet and greet. The message is that the board is endorsing such a candidate, and the quorum is an all-out effort. Okay, one final thing, which is there was a mention of what are best practices for. I think it was called candidate forums in the advertisement for this meeting. So how you do this, it's up to you, but a few things that I feel are some good principles are it's either everyone or no one. So it's not a meet and greet for some of the candidates and not others. It should be for everyone. There can be some exceptions to that, but I'm gonna leave that out for now and just say in general it should be everybody who's running. You want to have some kind of structure. So you might have, each person's going to do a 15-minute presentation on Zoom, and then there's going to be questions, whatever. Or in person would be better, and short, not a big, long, drawn-out thing, but something where people can actually meet the people who are running for the board, and that there should be a focus on the candidate's background, skills, and the intended contributions, possible contributions, or ones they already made if they're an incumbent. And I'm emphasizing this because, I've seen write-ups about, okay, if you should interview potential board candidates like you're interviewing people for a job. And ask them, what policy they would change, or what they think of the budget. Never mind the fact that they're not on the board; they probably don't know anything about the budget. But asking them questions that kind of don't make any sense because one person's not going to come on the board and change a policy. It's a group thing. It's not done by one person. So my suggestion is that you're more looking at these kinds of things, and means, motives, and opportunity. And finally, whatever you do, don't create adversarial situations where there isn't already one. And so, if you have a meet and greet with people, and there is there's an insurgent there, whatever, what you don't want to do is try to pit people against each other. That's going to happen naturally with the way people talk, but you have to remember that a board is a team, and ultimately the people that are on the board are going to need to work as a team. And one person that feels that they're an adversary to the board is not a productive kind of way to do things. So that is all I have. My goodness. So I've been talking for a long time, and now I'm ready to be asked questions.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for that wealth of knowledge. Very well explained. We have a number of questions and comments that have been put into the chat box. If folks have additional questions or comments, that's the right place to put them. So the first question that we have, what happens when there are divergent opinions on the existing board as to what perspectives, views, motives are desirable and appropriate for prospective candidates?
Well, I mean, I think it's, I wish I could say, well, you feed them that magic elixir and then they agree with you. I mean, it's you have to have a conversation about it, right? And if you have a strong idea about what is or isn't, appropriate, if you're feeling strongly about something, then you should be able to explain your position. But I think what makes a conversation like that productive is there's it's a saying of inquiry versus advocacy. So inquiring of the other people why they are thinking the way they're thinking, and not in an accusatory kind of thing. What kind of idiot would think that, right? But rather, tell me what you're thinking about. Tell me why you think that would be a problem. Tell me why you think that might be okay. How do you think that would affect the working of our board, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you just have to have a conversation, as you would with anything else where you're disagreeing, where it's a combination of listening to the other people and explaining your position. If you think it's going to be if you think there's something, I'm thinking about whether I want to use a particular example, and I will. So we had a conversation about somebody potentially being on our board who some of us believe has a conflict of interest. And some people were advocating for this person coming on the board, and a couple of us that heard that were concerned that was really going to be a bad idea. And so one of the things that we did was we tried to get the pulse of other people on the board, without trying to sway them one way or the other, but we just sort of put it out there that so-and-so and so-and-so believe that such a person should be on this board because of this and that. And so-and-so and I are concerned about this and that. What is your perspective? What do you think? And in fact, there was one person in particular who we were quite shocked. Another board member and I were quite shocked that this particular person was advocating for the candidate to be a candidate. And so we had a Zoom for an hour and 15 minutes to understand her thinking about it, because we respected her. She's a very experienced person, a very serious person, and we treated her that way. And, we didn't necessarily change all our minds, but we came to know what her ideas were. And then bit by bit, we gathered what other people thought. And it became clear that we had more people that thought that this was a bad idea than thought that this was a good idea. And the person who was advocating for it the most got the picture and backed off. So I'll just use that an example of, something we just went through like the day before yesterday. And we sorted it out. In the end, sometimes you don't want to take a vote and force people to take a position. You want to have conversation about it and then just let it kind of work its way toward a okay, it's obvious that we have more people thinking this way than that way, and this is the way we've got to go.
All right, the next question. How do you handle insurgents who ran before and lost and say that the current election was stolen? They even wrote across the notice of who won, writing in red ink, "Stolen." There were possibly 10 people who read these writings online, and they have caused some angry shareholders.
So, I would ask, what was your process? Who counted the votes? And do you have something in place where somebody is actually looking at? I mean, we have a managing agent that uses their spreadsheet, and they have a way of counting stuff. But we often have somebody. We have not somebody on the board, but a person, an owner who volunteers. Sometimes one, sometimes two, volunteers to look that over and double check everything. And
that was me. And
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That was me. And our lawyer is the overseer of our election,
Okay.
as well as our property manager.
Okay. So
these people are saying it's still stolen.
Yeah.
And I would like to say to them, what is the difference between an election denier and an angry loser?
Yeah.
But I haven't been able. But on the board, I feel I have to be careful with what I say.
I mean, we've dealt with some really.
Yeah.
We've dealt with some really unbelievable kinds of things. We've had an insurgent that has run many, many times. Yeah. So, and the best, my thought is the best way about any of these kinds of things, when someone does something like that, I mean, come on, you're writing stolen on the thing, whatever. I mean, we had a guy who festooned his bicycle outside. He tied up his bicycle outside and hung it with papers. All of these things were like nasty, nasty articles, nasty pictures, whatever, of people on the board or whatever. And you can't get into a war. You can't get into a flame war. What you must do is provide an alternative narrative, calmly and supported by whoever. In this case, you have your lawyer and your managing agent, and you just tell people this vote was legitimate. Our lawyer reviewed it. Our managing agent reviewed it. These are the results. Boom. And that's you are always, and that's part of the reason why you want to be communicating with people year round and building trust, whatever. And we did this with someone who sued us, and did crazy stuff. And we set up a Facebook page with like diatribes like the Unabomber, these on and on and on and screaming, and we had people who wanted to every time this guy said something, wanted to respond to correct him. And, I'm in charge of communications. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. What we're doing is we're presenting our narrative from people that are running this board calmly and running this building calmly. You know us. We're doing what we think is best. We listen to you. We're doing this. Here's what's going on, period. And so that's what I would, and I think that Tim has a way of handling the question. So I'm not sure if he wants to move on to the next one or not. But
Yeah, I
Present
think
your own narrative.
we'll get to
Comment.
some of
Thank
these
you.
other incidents soon.
Yeah.
The next question is, what's the optimal time or term to serve on the board?
I don't know that I think that depends on, I think that depends on the board. That depends on the person. I mean, I've seen people that should get off and people that, it's a shame that they left because they still have plenty to, uh, they play an important part and they still have something to give. And they're an institutional memory, whatever. So I don't know that I don't know that there's an answer to that. I think every 3 years coming up your seat coming up every 3 years is not a bad idea, but it can't, I mean, do you want the octogenarians running that we're talking about this in politics too, right? How long should somebody serve? And I really think it depends on the person and the board situation. So it depends.
Excellent.
I was a consultant for years, and that is the answer to everything. It
It is.
depends.
It's always a good answer. In the past 12 years, my co-op has had a quorum only once. We do not allow proxies. What are the best practices to get folks to actually attend?
Food. I know that sounds completely ridiculous, but I mean, there has to be, as I mentioned before, if your building runs nicely, then people think they don't have to come. So you may need a full court press that starts like a long time before that. And can you make it a party? Can you make it, I don't really a real party, but can you make it something that's not just the meeting? Can there be food there? Can people talk to their neighbors about coming? I mean, we haven't done an in-person meeting, and I kind of miss it. We haven't done an in-person meeting since COVID. And we really don't have the space to do it without people being kind of squashed together, and nobody wants to be squashed together anymore. Maybe there's more room in Westchester than there is on the Upper West Side, and probably for sure. But you have to do the same thing that you do to get people to pay attention. Only you have the extra task of getting them to physically bring their body to it. So if their friends are coming, if you can do hands-on kind of stuff where you have a group of people that go out and talk to their friends, and then that one tells that one, and that one tells that one, then it becomes an in kind of place to be. And let me tell you something. When we have food, people are like, they're like that. They're like that. Come and get the cupcakes. Oh,
An army travels on its stomach, as always.
yeah, right.
This is more of a comment than a question, but the person wants to know, what can you advise about a co-op board that has not changed for about 25 years, as they never achieve a quorum at their annual meeting? This actually seems to the observer to be on purpose, that they're doing everything they can legally to get away with stifling a quorum, so that they remain in power, they can run things as they see fit. They can ignore ideas of people that they are not their friends. And how do you work around that?
Well, I mean, you need a slate. You need new people, and you need a campaign. But I mean, without knowing the specific details and how well entrenched these people are and what kind of support they have, if you're the only one that finds it a problem, you're probably not going to get anywhere. And I don't, how big is the building? How big is the board? I have no idea. Um, if you're the only one, you're probably not going to get very far. But you're probably not the only one. And so my first task, if that were me, would be to start talking to people and find out if we've got enough people that could conceivably make a quorum happen. If we have enough people who could, excuse me, who might be willing to serve, might be willing to put together a slate and say, we'd like to be the people. You're talking about a coup basically, and it's never pretty. it's kind of ugly, but it's only going to be done by a group of people, and you've got to have something really, something really cogent to be telling others to get them to get out of their complacency, whatever it is. So is there something that everybody's pissed about, but nobody thinks they can do anything about? That that could be something. Or do you have people who are like, hey, it's fine with me. They can knock themselves out. Things are going okay. So you can't do it by yourself. So you got to find other people and you got to find something to rally around. You might want to talk to a lawyer too, not the lawyer that they are using.
So we have one comment and one question remaining in the queue. The comment is, we had our social committee get involved and get the food for the meeting, and it helped.
Okay.
So there you go.
Food.
Action. And then the question is, how can you get quorum to discuss a major upcoming project, which will likely turn into in the event that let me rephrase. How can you get quorum to discuss a major upcoming project, knowing that that meeting will likely turn into a weird ranting match when most residents are uninterested and those that do come to meetings mostly complain, but also don't want to join the board, or perhaps aren't really qualified to be on the board?
Is the place also on fire? I mean, could there be anything? Could there be something added bad to that? So you have I guess I'm not sure about what the details are, but you have a project, and to even discuss the project, you need a quorum of people. Okay, let me just answer some of the ancillary things. If people come to your meeting and people come to the meeting and rant, someone's not facilitating. So you need to find someone who can facilitate the meeting. And I mentioned that comment to you. I used to sit and part of what I did for a living in my job was to facilitate stuff. And I would wonder, why is this guy still yelling after 5 minutes? How come nobody can get him to shut up? And because there's ways to do this. So somebody needs to facilitate if indeed there is somebody to do that. But is this a project that can't go any further if there isn't a quorum to discuss it? Or I'm not really sure
I can add some context.
Okay, sure.
So
who am I looking
quorum,
at? Where are
the
you?
quorum isn't necessarily necessary for the project.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
The quorum is necessary so that people are informed that this project needs to happen, and kind of so that they're aware that this is happening. I am under the impression that most people don't read their emails or check their mail for the communication that has been going out. And it is unfair to then go forward with this project and then people feel blindsided that they haven't been told, email,
Yeah. Okay.
written. So how do you kind of get people to actually, one, attend the shareholder meetings, and then to be receptive or allow people to say, hey, this is what's happening. We've emailed you about this. But now we have other people that you can ask questions to, like whether that's the accountant or the architect, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's true that a lot of people don't read their emails, and so it can't just be emails, but also the way you do your emails makes a difference. And so if I look at the subject line of the email and I have no idea what the story is, and you haven't, when I have an email sent out, as I mentioned, so I'm responsible for this stuff. So if I want to get people's attention, I make sure that the subject line of the communication makes them realize right away, this is about them. We are planning a hallway project that's going to affect you. Read on. And then you present to people, look, this is what we're contemplating, this is what we're going to do, here's how it affects you, here's how you get more information. You repeat it, you put up signs. Hey, we're going to have a little gathering with the food, right? So to talk about the such and such. I mean, I think that if you're giving yourself the yet another hill to climb, which is the getting a quorum, that's just, you're just adding another difficult thing to an already difficult thing, right? So I think you have to start communicating in in writing about this in a way that will get people's attention. And it's not just a one-time thing. You can put signs up at the front desk. I mean, I can't tell you how many times the resident manager is going to kill me one of these days for putting signs on every floor of a 36-story building. There's a sign sometimes. If it's something important and I need to get people's attention, it's on every floor. And it's not a sign that you have to take out your glasses to read. It's like in your face, letting you know exactly what's happening and how you can get more information. And it's regular, it's constant. And we had a local law 11 that we thought was going to cost $2 million. It cost $4 million. We had to tell people about that. We had to tell them that they had to take all the tile off their balconies. Beautiful stuff. I'm crying for the tile on my balcony, right? That had to come off. We had to explain why, and we had to get their attention because they had to do things. And so we've had a whole bunch of these kinds of things, and it's a matter of communicating, very transparent in a way that you don't build up to stuff. You're like, the subject grabs you. The first sentence, people know why they need to pay attention to it. So you really have to be able to do that. You don't what they call bury the lead. You don't work your way up to it. It's right there in your face. Your stuff is easy to read. You have signs. You have people talking to each other. You hold little meetings, that people can come to. Hey, come to a thing tonight. Where we're going to talk about blah blah blah, and you just have this all out kind of thing to get the information to people wherever they are. And yeah, and it's definitely doable, but I would not want to try to get a big meeting if one, it's hard to get quorum, and two, your meetings are chaotic, and people are ranting and raving, whatever. So the last thing you want to do is bring everybody together. You can do it in smaller things. So all that to say, I think it's doable. You need a good communication strategy, and you need to do a lot of different things besides email, and you need to not have a chaotic meeting about it. And you have to start early. I don't know when you're planning to do this. People can take bad news too. I mean, and if you involve people also, if there's anything that if there's anything they can do about this, like, are they going to have any say in it? Whatever it is, are they going to have a say? I mean, we have things where people are not going to have a say. With a $4 million assessment, you're not getting a say of it. You know what your say is? You could pay it all in the beginning, right? So if you want to pay it up front, you can pay it up front, But other things, like when we did a hallway project, we did surveys. What do you like about what we have? What don't you like? What would you like to see? Blah blah blah. And then we narrowed it down, and we had people say which things they liked or whatever. I mean, we involved them in this big, expensive and inconvenient kind of thing. It was a lot easier for people to tolerate. So that's what I'll say.
Well, again, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and with your insight. We've all got quite a lot to chew over. And I want to just, as we close out, remind everybody that you are welcome to attend the BRI's general membership meeting, which will be taking place at Hotel MTK in Mount Kisco on June 18th. We have a county-themed event that night where we'll have speakers from the county planning department, the county consumer protection department, as well as the county health department. So if you are one of the buildings that may be affected by the lead rental registry and you're in one of the applicable zip codes, we will have the person who is administering that program in person. We also will have the commissioner of consumer protection talking about their licensed contractor registry, which is all online, as well as their Renegade Renovator online database of people who are scofflaws and might not have the right insurance, might not be registered, may not have the correct licensure. These are the renovators and the contractors to avoid. Without further ado, I want to turn this over to Chair Jane Curtis for the final word.
You're on
Jane,
mute.
you there?
You're on mute.
You're still on mute, Jane.
Sorry. Want to thank Mary for a very engaging presentation and for providing us a roadmap to conducting effective board elections. I want to thank all of you for your attention and for your questions. So we hope you have a great summer, and we'll see you in September.
Bye, everybody.
Night.